What is your freedom worth to you? Each of our guests had a light bulb moment. They longed to live rather than merely exist. They smashed through their fears and programmed minds, trusting themselves, their faith, and their survival instincts, leaving the guilt, fear, oppression, and drudgery of their past for a brighter future. They took a brave and courageous step into freedom. This is their story of how they got a life. Welcome to Get a Life podcast, X-Cult Conversations. You matter, and so does your story.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Get a Life podcast. I'm here with my friend Anne and Ross, who you've met before, and our special guest with us this evening is Steve Edwards. Steve left the Brethren a few years back, and I'm going to open the floor. And Steve, start at the beginning and tell us your story.
Right, thanks, Jackie. So if I start at the beginning, my childhood, I had a pretty normal childhood. The funny thing about the Brethren is you listen to different people, and we all brought up a little bit differently. Different meetings had different standards, and some were relatively strict, some were relatively free, and some had a reputation for being too free. Where I grew up in the High Wycombe area, it wasn't too bad. And as a kid, when I lived in Marlow, lived down near the river, I used to come and go, even as a little child, on my tricycle. I would cycle down to the town centre and High Street, and growing up, I was free to come and go. I always thought my parents were too strict because I had another local family who had more freedom, and they had stuff that I didn't have that I wanted but wasn't allowed. But looking back at it, it was okay. Everyone's got their stuff. We had another family that moved away. A boy who's a few years older than me, and I was sexually abused by him. Nothing too serious, but it's there. I was terrified of that guy.
How old were you at that sort of stage when that went on, Steve? Were you sort of under 10 or?
I was probably, I don't know. There's only two instances that I remember. One, I would have been about 7 or 8, and the other one, I was a bit older. He came to stay with us, and he was sleeping in my bedroom, and I was maybe 10 or something that time, 11.
A child, essentially, a child.
Yeah, a child. Yeah. When I was 7, and this seems, ridiculous. He made me climb up a very high tree in a local park. I'd seen it when I was 7. Stuck a cigarette in my mouth and said, "Smoke this, or I'm going to push you off." But that didn't kill me. I was just terrified of the bloke. He was a bully. But yeah, I don't want to dwell on that. It's not that big a deal. It wasn't nice, but I had 3 sisters, so I was the only boy. So I wasn't into football or anything like that. I was more into playing with trains and stamp collections but I was very close to my mum. I was a mummy's boy. And my mum was a very godly woman, and she gave me a real love of the scriptures, the Bible, and taught me that, and that's my experience, that Jesus was my best friend as a kid, and that's how I grew up. But I had kids around me, and so we got the tricks as well, the usual sort of boy stuff, and didn't always pay for our sweets at the sweet shop and whatever, all sorts. And at school, obviously, there's the usual discrimination. We weren't going to assembly and all of that.
So sorry to interrupt, but presumably you went to a mainstream school, because like me in our youth, there wasn't the one school, was there? So we were in a normal school. Yeah.
Yes. In the infant and then junior school, there's quite a few brethren kids around. Right. But I then went to a grammar school, and I was the first brethren boy. It's a boys only school. I was the first brethren boy to have been there for, I don't know, about 25 years. So it was uncharted ground, essentially. And that wasn't fun. I still wanted to be one of the lads. So I was the first boy at the school to wear Doc Martens to school. And it's just a little story. They used to call me Buddha because I stayed out of the morning prayers and all of that. And then I became known as Buddha in Boots.
Careful, that might stick, Steve. Yeah.
That was there. And there was the usual, I had hassles at school and all that, but some of it definitely generated by being the brethren. I was different, and I hated school. I hated it, and I was so glad that I could leave when I was 16, even though the head wanted me to stay on and do A-levels and go to uni, which of course now I wish I had done, but I was desperate to get into the family business, so I got a job waiting for me, which I did. And at the age of 16, I was put on a train up to the West End of London to go selling, which for 16-year-olds, possibly,
With
if I wouldn't do that,
how much of that desperate to leave school? I mean, school was an uncomfortable place when you were the only brethren person in a large school. But how much of that desperation to leave school do you think may have been influenced by the environment you were in that A-levels and university were not an option anyway? You would never be encouraged down that route, would you?
No, it's 100%. I mean, I did an essay once about it. I don't know what my English master thought, but the sort of theory about you're far better to leave school at 16 and get on and work your way up and earn money rather than stay on 2 years or 3 years at uni, not earning money until much later. And very much the brethren mindset. Being the little rebel I was, my mum would drop me off at railway station and I'd pop into the kiosk and buy the Sun and Daily Express and packet of cigarettes just to be really, really cool. I hated smoking, hated it, and I couldn't do it, but I did try, but I just couldn't bear it. And so I was thrust out there, and as soon as I could drive, I was given a vehicle, and I was out and about travelling the country, and I because I was in sales, I had a lot of freedom, which maybe isn't actually that good for a 17-year-old. You need a bit of discipline. I think everyone needs a bit of discipline at that age, a bit of structure, and I didn't really have any. I just go out, get orders, come back. I did all right. Business was good. So that was fine. And, in between, I was doing dreadful stuff. I might stop off at a pub for lunch. And the first time I went to a pub in Watford, I sort of parked across the road, and I reversed my car in so that I could make a quick getaway in case there was a big fight in the pub, because pubs are such
Yeah. Which pub was that, Steve, in Watford? Can you remember?
It's in North Watford somewhere.
It may not be there now anyway.
And I was really nervous going to this pub. And of course, there's hardly anybody in there, and I had a pint of for 50p or whatever it was. And and then I'd get a pub lunch sometimes. And of course, the other thing was I got pre-recorded tapes, listening to music, and I would buy wicked magazines like True Detective or something, sort of.
I just wondered what you were going to say there for a minute, Steve, but yeah.
And that did come later. But it's a lot of harmless stuff. And I would stay away at a lot of places overnight. I'd stay with other brethren in other places. And over the sort of 3-4 year period before I was married, I did that, and I'd stay for weekends, and I enjoyed a good time. And I tended to stay with the more lively element, you might say. And unfortunately did get some reports back to the local lead at Wickham that my presence wasn't always totally appreciated. And one time we went to a ski slope, and although someone took me there, apparently it was my bad influence that we went to this ski slope.
Right.
We went to a fairground down at Plymouth once. I didn't know it was there. I was taken. I was very happy to go along, but it's not the sort of thing we did. But it's. I'm going to come to a bit more about that later. But when I was 11, my dad had been to 3-day meetings with Mr. Symington at Coventry, and he came to where I've been staying for the weekend, and he was telling the family there all about it. And one thing Mr. Symington had said, that the rapture was going to come within 10 years. So as an 11-year-old boy, I knew I had to get married by the time I was 21 if I wanted to do what every boy wants to do. Mm-hmm. And that was my sort of a big priority in my life. And so I did. I got married at 21 and 4 days. And even the dating, and Anne, my dating was completely different to yours.
Okay.
It was my little sister's best friend. Initially, I picked her up from school when she was 15, and just drop her off home. And her mum was quite happy. And then we'd go out for a walk. And then she come to us for the day, and we even went out for days on our own, with parents quite happy about it. Nothing untoward happened, actually, which just shows how terrified we were of consequences. And because it only like a year or two before had been the 7-day matter, when people had been withdrawn from for minimum 7 days for fornication, adultery, or unclean handling. And so, we are absolutely terrified of being tarred with that brush. So, we got married. Kids came quickly, as they do, because they did. We had, I was working in the family business. We're doing all right. I wasn't making loads of money, but we were okay. And we had 2 little boys, and very close together, 15 months apart, and we would do terrible things, like we'd take them swimming to the local swimming pool, which they absolutely loved. It was great, but of course it's like you mustn't say anything to anybody. I remember one time when it banned going to beaches, we went to West Wittering for the day on the Saturday, and the following day we were meant to be going out for Sunday dinner, and we just cancelled because we were terrified the boys were going to say, "Oh, we went to the sea yesterday." So,
and when you look back on it, you just had a family day out at the seaside. Hey, when you look, but we understand that fear. When you're in, the fear is just, isn't it? It's
it's just not worth getting caught.
Yeah.
So we just had to feign sickness. But and then, our second boy, he had a brain tumour, and after 10 months, having had radiotherapy treatment, there's nothing else they could do. He passed, which was a really tough period of time. But at that point, previous to that, I had been having my doubts about God and all of that, and that actually gave me a lot of clarity. One particular day, I remember a little boy had a brain scan. This is about 4 months in, and we were waiting for the results, and waiting and not knowing, it was just excruciatingly painful. And I'm just going around, and I literally felt my head was going to explode. I thought I was going to have a breakdown or something. I just absolutely, the pressure was so great, I just hardly knew how to cope. And I could tell you the spot on a roundabout in London, the Chiswick roundabout. I was going rounds, and the thought came to my mind. It was a scripture in Isaiah, says, I couldn't even get the word right to start off with, but it's, "Thou wilt keep in perfect peace the mind stayed on thee." And for me, that gave me a lot of clarity. And the next bit is, "For he confideth in thee." That I just had to trust God. I had to trust the Lord Jesus. I couldn't control this. God was in charge, and I had to go with it. And that actually really took the pressure off. And whilst that scan actually came back and it was good, that was quite a life-changing moment for me. And then, I say he passed 6 months after that. I'm not going to go into all of that, but we had, I guess one of the quite strange thing is that there weren't any of the photo albums around then that the Brethren have of every single household. And so my brother-in-law, who's very keen on photography, he got some photos printed up, and these were sent out. Thousands of photos were printed and sent out all around the world, different people in Australia and New Zealand and the US, whatever, all around the UK. And then, of course, we get people coming up to us at meetings, "Oh, we've got your picture on our fridge." And even years after. And so we were known to the Brethren.
In fairness to the Brethren, was that done as a sort of symbol of support for you and your then wife, that they'd, the Brethren are thinking of you?
Very much so, and it was very... Yeah, and I said to a customer once saying about it, and I said, I know every day there's thousands of prayers going up for my little boy. And it was very encouraging us at that time. But it had that sort of ongoing thing that you'd sort of go somewhere and it's, "Oh yeah, you're Harry's dad, aren't you?" And even overseas. But
Yeah, I remember we used to pray for Harry Edwards. Yeah.
I think we had one of the photos.
I think we did as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to touch on as well, drink. As most people know, there's a fair bit of alcohol around in the Brethren. It's one of those things that's been more than tolerated for a long time. I mean, when I was growing up in the late 60s, it was a very exciting time because there's so many changes, and Mr. Jim was doing this and that and the other, coming out all sorts of new directives, and sisters could have their hair down, they could have hymns at the meetings, and he made an awful lot of the young people. It's young people this, the young people that, and there was exciting things like toilet rolls being thrown at meetings and paper darts and all sorts. Yeah, bizarre, and musical drums being played, and then of course Aberdeen happened, and that sort of changed. Certain ministering brothers tried to sort of carry it on, but they didn't have the charisma or the authority of Jim Taylor. But so there was. I mean, my first drink I was offered was at 3-day meetings. We had two at Easter 73 and 75. I'm pretty sure it was 73 when I'd have been 10, and my little sister gave me a glass of whiskey that Dad had poured for us each. Very, very weak. She was 2 years younger than me. She might have been 10, I might have been 12, but I'm pretty sure she was 8 and I was 10. And so there was just alcohol around everywhere. And my dad didn't push it any more than anyone else did. But it was a done thing at that time because Mr. Simonton drank like a fish too. And so as a kid, I'd had this understanding that drinking was a really good thing. Because Mr. Taylor drank a lot of whiskey, and Mr. Simonton drank a lot of whiskey. So if you drank a lot of whiskey, it's got to be good. And one time I was around with some friends, and they raided their dad's drinks cupboard and got this bottle of, I guess it was whiskey, and they each had a swig. And I was like, and I had a swig, and I thought, but I said, oh yeah, that's great, because I wanted to be cool. But then, I don't really remember drinking. And we had might be given sherry or something when we were out. And of course, there was the mandatory port at the supper every Sunday morning, which is something that I'm afraid I have quite strong feelings about now, that 6-month-old babies are given alcohol. It's, apart from being illegal, it's really dangerous. It shouldn't be done.
When they're even younger than that, aren't they, when they're given it? They're sometimes given it a month, 2 months old.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. And then, just when we used to go to our interchange meeting at Ealing, there was an off-licence just up the road by a big grassy area. And we'd all go up there and we'd get beer, and we'd be standing around drinking cans of beer after the meeting. No one batted an eyelid. I was 14 the first time I bought my own beer at that place. The owner didn't bat an eyelid, and no brethren ever said anything that I recall. It was just accepted. And then when I had friends to stay, or I'd go and stay with friends, more when I was later teens, 16, 17, 18, used to come over to Belfast fairly regularly. We always had drink in the bedroom as well. The dads might give us a bit, but then we'd get up to bed and then really start drinking. And that just went on. And then when I got married, it just carried on. I couldn't afford to drink as much once I got married. And for 25 years, I drank pretty heavily every day. I didn't get drunk as such. I never got me directly into trouble as an immediate consequence of my drinking, but there was some pretty heavy drinking going on. And so by the time I was in my mid-40s, I'd had my own business. I've been self-employed for, I don't know, nearly 20 years by then. And we hit some circumstances where the business went downhill. We were in the gardening industry, and the garden industry basically crashed because the BBC stopped the Garden Force programme, which was very popular. A lot of garden centres closed or sold on, and lots of people in the industry had major problems, and we had major problems. And that caused problems at home. We had some pretty serious marriage problems, and it was New Year's Eve or early New Year's Day 2010. I decided to go and visit a certain guy's house, and as an upshot of that, the following day I found myself in the Priory rehab hospital, and I was sat in a corner of a room with, I think, 7, maybe 5 people around me, basically telling me I had to go into Priory to save my marriage. They said, we'll look after your family, we'll look after your business, you just go in there and get sorted out.
Just to try and capture, I'm trying to imagine the kind of pressure you all would have been under as a family. You had how many children by this stage?
We'd had 6, so lost 1, so we had 5 at home. Yeah.
So 5 at home, and you've got a business that has hit hard times through no fault of your own, and a house to maintain.
I made some bad business decisions as well.
Yeah. Or maybe we won't go into that one, but yeah, okay. But you've shown there. I mean, it's a scenario that, in a sense, anybody could hit in their life, isn't it? But what I'm trying to capture is you were in a very tight-knit community. What support did you feel at that time?
I mean, again, I'm slightly embarrassed, Ross, because of what happened to you. Basically, the brethren, they came together and they raised a lot of money, and they paid for me to go to rehab. No loan or anything, they just paid. Mm-hmm. And they actually raised extra money, and they did we decorated our hall, did new carpets in the hall staircase and landing, and other stuff. And that was across the board. But then that was the interchange. And even some brethren outside of the interchange gave money. It was amazing. And but there was, well, I'll come to that maybe a bit when I came out. But going in, I was terrified because, I'd never eaten with anyone who wasn't brethren. And on the way, I asked one of the folk with me, I said, what am I going to do? What about eating? And they said, oh, no, Mr. Hale says you just basically go with it. You do what they tell you to do. So if you're meant to eat together, you eat together. And so I was really nervous. So, I went into this very protected space, basically a secure psychiatric hospital at the end of the day. Locks on the windows, locks on the doors. I had been through, I'd had suicide attempts, and I was actually on, I was on hourly suicide watch while I was in there, because I was in a very, very bad way. Because just after I got in, I had a visit from a couple of brethren guys who basically gave me some more information about stuff in the marriage, which hit me really hard.
So they basically kicked you when you were down.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think they did it maliciously. They did it to let me know what was happening, and to say a certain guy I'd been withdrawn from. I think maybe they thought that might have cheered me up. It didn't. And I basically had a plan, and I let this slip to somebody, one of the workers in there, and I was put onto 1 hour. In fact, at that point, they said, if you carry on like this, we're going to put you on 15-minute watch, and you won't be able to go to any meetings, you won't be able to go swimming, because we had sort of various treats we had in there, and basically sort yourself out, and with support.
Sorry, I was going to say, if you don't mind asking, Steve, which branch of the Priory were you in? Because I was in Bristol.
I was at Roehampton.
Okay, yeah.
The Priory, so it's quite glamorous. Very, very wealthy people there.
Yeah.
Quite famous people there. The media didn't know were there, and all sorts. So
yeah, I had a well-known singer's son in there with me.
Right. Yeah. Going in, I did not want to go in. I didn't think I needed to be there, but I was told, well, the police would look at things sympathetically, because what I got up to a couple of days before, the day before, and so it's like, you need to get in there. And I didn't do anything too bad, a bit of criminal damage, but the priests, they asked me about it, and very high up guy that I broke bread with, but he was sort of one of the top bods in the UK. He said to me, I can understand why you did it, but it wasn't right. So, there was sympathy and there was love. Generally, I wasn't treated badly. But I had to get in there. And that's when I was introduced to this 12-step program, and we went to different programs with different people. So I've been to different fellowships, as they call it. Slightly ironic. There's Alcoholics Anonymous. There's Overeaters Anonymous. There's Cocaine Anonymous, there's Drug Addicts Anonymous, you can name it. They say there's 57 varieties, a bit like Heinz. Whatever you've got, there's something. There's a 12-step program for it. And I got into those meetings and I enjoyed them, and I liked what I heard. I didn't buy into the program, but I enjoyed the social side of it. And particularly when I came back out, I did find quite a lot of support there, and it was a positive input in my life. And when I came out, I continued going to meetings. Not everyone agreed with it, but I was under the understanding that Bruce Hales had his approval. And some brethren were very positive about it, and some were quite negative about it. And I got it both ways from different ones. But
I had exactly the same experience.
Yeah. Because I've been in the Priory I mean, previous to that, brethren had got involved in my business and been trying to help us. But basically, this one guy that was helping me, he said to one of the others while I was there, he said, there's some businesses you just can't grow. He'd had it with one of his businesses, so he'd kindly given it to a brother-in-law. But, it gets a point, and our industry was in free fall. The best one in the world. We had a product that had been very fashionable, and we could sell it for almost any price. And now we had huge stocks of product we couldn't sell at any price. It was gone. It was horrendous. So they arranged for me to get a job in another brethren business where I worked. I would do like an 8-hour stint there, starting early in the morning, and then go to my business in the afternoon. By which time I was down to just one employee then, and sort of limping along. And I was under huge pressure to actually get rid of it, basically just dump it. But I had huge investment in it, and I was a bit resistant to that. And we continued selling product and just selling stock. And for me, it was the right thing to do, because we were getting some money in. Anyway, I worked in another business, the guy that I have huge respect for, a very successful business, doing office fit out, so furniture and all the kit, carpets, air conditioning, you name it, the whole lot. And I got on well there. I really enjoyed it. And during that time, sorry, jumping around a little bit, when my business was going well, I had lots of jobs in the brethren. Now, I did what we called the dinner list, so the allocation of brethren every second or third week, when you're talking about 550 brethren, out for meals and whatever. And we developed software for it. I was a guinea pig for that. That was brilliant. And I was a regional director at Unifocus, the sort of precursor of UBT, and lots of other stuff. I was involved with school, and that's one thing. I used to do PE with the boys. Obviously, the boys had to be separate to the girls, and used to take them to five-a-side football or whatever. And at one particular year, at the end of the year, I said to the trustees, and they were happy with it, that I wanted to give the boys a bit of a treat, and we'd go to Go Ape. So I sent out a letter to the parents, and most of the parents were fine. Some parents like, no way is our child going anywhere like that. There's a common entrance. I said, what about when you go to Tesco's? But,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then another time, we'd been over to the war graves in Belgium, and we thought it'd be really good to take a load of kids over there. So we took, I don't know, a year of kids, 2 carloads of us. We went over to Belgium for a day, went around the war graves, and you can go, actually, there's some of the old trenches, you can actually see what it was all like. And it's a brilliant day out, and then to Bruges in the afternoon. Kids absolutely loved it, but some folk, they were like, no way, we're not doing that. So even within our own sort of city, different people had different standards as to right and wrong. Anyway, back to when I was, this is about 2012, I got this job. And around that time, there was a lot going on with the Charity Commission, who had they basically refused an application for the Brethren on a meeting room in Somerset, I think it was, or Devon, and on the basis that the Brethren didn't demonstrate any public benefit from their charity. And I had a little bit of a different.
To clarify for that, I think that was actually off the back of a law change, wasn't it, in 2006? Yeah, because the President had always had charitable status, but the law changed to say that charities had to prove the public benefit to demonstrate. That's where they came unstuck.
I think it was after 7/7 bombings, wasn't it? Because some of the guys that were trustees of a Muslim church.
That's right.
And so, to be fair, I mean, I had a bit of a different opinion from the brethren, but you don't really like to say it at the time. And I did say to one or two, I don't know why, just don't go to the Charity Commission and say, sorry, we've got it wrong. We've done what we've always done. We never had to do this before. Tell us what we need to do and we'll go with it. I think they would have respected it. But instead, the brethren tried to prove being charitable.
I think they absolutely would, because we actually had a meeting with the Charity Commission some years back, but after 2012, and they very much came with the ethos, we encourage charities to change. We're not there to just strike them off the register willy-nilly, you know, without a thought. We're there to try and encourage them to make the changes necessary so they are fulfilling charitable benefits. Yeah. And so I can see where your logic came from, Steve. Just make the change.
Well, I mean, to me, it seems, you know, the brethren they've been fulfilling the law because, you know, back in whatever the 80s, and there was that big case, and we then had to put notice boards up outside every meeting. As far as I was concerned, the brethren thought they were fulfilling the law in what they were doing, and we could easily just said, just show us what we need to do and do it. But instead, had this massive campaign to prove that the brethren had always been charitable, which is not how I've seen it. I mean, as a kid, I'm not allowed to ever put a penny in a charity box.
Expressly said that. It was said you would give to the brethren, not to outside the world, the charities outside. If you had spare money, it's given to the brethren, wasn't it?
It was called an unequal yoke, wasn't it? Where we were entering into what the rest of the world were doing, and
and even like Mufti Day, a lot of kids would wear non-uniform clothes to school because then they would have to give some money to Red Nose,
to some charity.
So I don't want to dwell overly on all this, but there was a Baroness Berridge basically did there was a recording of a speech in the House of Lords, and we watched it as a family because that was on the white list that you could watch on your laptops. And so we watched it, and some of the stuff she said in there I thought was just didn't make sense. It wasn't right. And so I actually called her office and said, look, you know, it's a great speech, but honestly, some of it you've got wrong. It's not all correct. And so she said, well, do you want to come and tell me what it's really like? So, I did, and corrected quite a few misconceptions. I didn't go there to badmouth the brethren. I didn't slander anybody or make anyone out to be worse than they were or anything like that. It's like, no, this is really what we do. And they were labouring under some really odd stuff that they thought the brethren did. And they didn't. No, so they didn't get bank mortgages. And it's like, yes, they do. That's just one thing I remember. Anyway, that sort of snowballed a bit, and I got involved with a number of members of the House of Lords and the House of Commons, senior clergy, and government departments and the media, and got quite big. It was quite scary. But I just want to. There was a point when that comes a little bit later, but I'll come to that then. I'm just going to read a little bit because I've got. I wrote a lot of stuff down, so I was going to publish a book, which is still it's there. But after a period of time, in October 2013, we went to it's called the Achievers Seminar. No, not cinema, seminar in one quarters, and about 2,500 brethren there, and we parked up and we went in. We got our drinks and bacon roll and what have you, and then queued up to go into the main auditorium, and even then there was two queues. There was a male queue and a female queue, and the men's queue was shorter because we didn't have any handbags. And I went through the X-ray scanning machine. It didn't respond to me, so I had nothing on me. And I had to wait while they were frisking some people in front. So I said to the guy that was overseeing it all, I said, "Oh, you want me to, you're going to frisk me?" And he said, "Oh, no, you're all right." And so I went through, and my wife came with me.
Just to clarify, this is a brethren seminar, but not a meeting. Have I got that correct? Yeah. So it's basically brethren frisking brethren to check what they haven't got recording devices. What was the purpose behind that?
Yeah, devices or cameras or anything.
Okay.
Telephone.
For this achievement seminar.
Yeah, for kids. It's for school kids. We take
our daughter. I see. It was for school kids. Okay, right. Just trying to sort of clarify the scene. Yeah.
Anyway, we went in and we sat there and we waited around, and there was talk that BDH was going to be turning up, and we waited for about 2 hours, and then someone came walking up and down the aisles, looking along all the rows. The guy who previously said to me, "No, you're all right," and up and down, and he disappeared off. And about 10 minutes later, someone walked up and said they wanted the 3 rows, that's a row in front of us, our row and the row behind, to go out and go through the scanner again because they detected some electronic activity. So as we were walking out, one of my local brethren from the interchange said, "Oh, so they sussed you out then, Steve, have they?" with a big fat grin on his face. And I thought, yeah, how did you guess, sort of thing. So I knew I was safe because I had nothing on me. And so we went through back through the scanners, and I was going through, this guy said to me, "Could you step this way, please?" I said, "Okay." And he said, "I'm afraid you can't return to the seminar, and I'm asking you to leave the premises." I said, "Why on earth is that?" He says, "Because you've been acting suspiciously." I said, "That's ridiculous. What do you mean by that?" He said, "I can't say, but you've been refused entry to one of these seminars before, haven't you?" I said, "No, never. I haven't." And we had a little argument about that. Then I said, "I need to speak to someone from UBT." And he said, "No, there's not anybody here." I said, "Yes, there is. It's calling with them." He said, "Oh, well, no, they're all too busy." So I said, "Oh, well," yeah, he said, "It might look like that, but they're all busy and can't spare the time to speak to you." So I said, "What about my wife?" He said, "We'll go and get her out." So I said, "Well, probably best not to because of the cringe factor." They said, "Okay, fine, we'll leave her there." I was then escorted out of the area, and they said they wanted me to leave, go away. So I said, "Well, what if I refuse to leave?" And these guys, he wouldn't really mess with, just said, "We will encourage you to leave." So I thought there's no point I'm not going to.
Were these brethren guys or proper security or what?
These were security guys, the sort of official brethren of security.
Right. So these were security guys, presumably employed by the brethren to, And where was the seminar actually held? Had a hall been hired or some sort of venue?
No, it was the UBT headquarters at Warwick.
Oh, at Warwick, yes. Yeah.
And a huge web had been turned into an auditorium.
Okay.
And also, just for the listeners, how much had you had to pay to go to this seminar?
I haven't got a clue. Can't remember. It was refunded.
Yeah.
Well, let's look on the bright side, eh? Yeah. So they have this seminar set up, but they obviously bring in scanners and independent security personnel. But from the way you're describing it, bear in mind, the only people there are brethren community people who should all be one big happy family, because that's what they like to promote, isn't it? Their sense of community. But it sounds like you went through something akin to airport security.
Exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was all done by the brethren. These security guys are more on the outside, on the boundaries, just sort of keeping it, make sure we weren't being sort of mobbed by opposers.
What was it, because BDH was going to be there, or was that general in the seminar?
No, I think that's always like that. There was a rumour he was going to be there, but he didn't turn up. So anyway, they then had to get the keys for the cars, because the cars were parked in, locked in, so I couldn't just drive off. So they then had to get the keys to a couple of cars in front of me and move them out of the way. Eventually I got out and started to drive off, and a little white van came out behind me with a like great big long aerial on top, and started following me. So we had a little bit of fun and I got rid of him. And but I was in a mess. I was completely freaked out. It was horrible.
Well, you didn't know what you'd done. You didn't know what this was all about, presumably.
No, I didn't. I had no. I mean, okay, so I had been in touch with persons that the brethren definitely wouldn't be particularly impressed about. I didn't realise that anyone knew anything about it. This is the first I knew of it. So they must have sort of got onto something, but didn't have any real evidence to catch me red-handed. Unfortunately, I wasn't red-handed. And then I heard a rumour afterwards that I was covered in wires. It was a rumour that was going around the country.
God.
Yeah.
And that was
we know about the Chinese whispers amongst the closed community. Yeah.
They get more and more fantastical, don't they?
They do. Yeah.
So, because BDH was in the country, we also had an invitation to the Sutton, where I'm going to speed this up a bit because there's other stuff I want to talk about. But he turned up there and I was eyeballed on the way in by these security guys, and came over to greet me when I parked the car and said, "Can you come with us, please?" And I said, "What's going on?" He said, "We're going to search you. As long as you're okay, you can carry on as normal." So they searched me. I had to take my belt off, my shoes off. They took the pen out of my pocket, tried to take that apart to see if there's a microphone or camera in it or anything. And there was nothing. I wasn't so stupid as to go there with anything with me. Yes, I'd got my own laptop by then. I got my own phone by then, but I wasn't taking those to fellowship meetings or brethren seminars. And got inside, and I sat right at the back of the brothers' rows on the end, waiting to feel my collar be felt. And after about half an hour, there was Steve. I was like, "Oh, here we go." And it's like, we need this row to move out to make room for more sisters, because there's a shortage of seats for sisters. So then we go out in the foyer. But they got big screens up so you could see BDH once he was there. And so I was standing by the screen and it's, oh, Steve, can you come and sit over here? So I had to go and sit, coincidentally, next to the nephew of the guy BDH was staying with.
So
whether there's anything in that or
just paint a picture and tell me if it's inaccurate for people that perhaps aren't familiar. If there's a meeting with BDH, the room is usually the meeting hall is usually very, very full, isn't it?
it's
And am I
rammed,
right
yeah.
in thinking they'll put screens up around the foyer and the outside so people can actually congregate in the foyer and so on, so that they can effectively get as many people as possible to listen.
Yeah.
Have I painted that picture you're describing correctly?
Right. Yeah, they've got big screens.
And in recent times, the meeting halls were built so that the doors literally folded right back between the meeting room and the foyer, so that it was one big
room.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was outside foyer, and even though I could see into the room where I was sat, I couldn't see the front row. I didn't get a glimpse of the great man, but I could see him on the screen.
Like a pop concert, really.
Yeah. Not as much fun, I don't think.
No, maybe not as much fun.
To the stage.
Yeah.
But so it was, I lost a lot of weight that week between those two instances. It was horrific, absolutely horrific. I was totally freaked out because nobody came up to me and said, Steve, we think you're doing something. It's all completely, this elephant in a room, and nobody said anything about it.
Yeah.
My wife and older son, they came to me one night and they said, what's it all about? There must be something. I was like, I don't know. I do not know why it's happened. Well, it's slightly tricky because I had a pretty clear hunch why it had happened, but I didn't know why it had happened. So I said I didn't know why it happened. And so, this all went on and on. And yeah, I was watching, I was on the sort of Peebs.net.
Yeah.
That was very interesting, giving me a bit of insight. And I met up with one or two ex-brethren, one of whom was an old friend of mine, and he said to me that the brethren are a cult, and I was like, no way. And he said to me, I didn't become a Christian until after I left the brethren. I was like, rubbish. Fully programmed PB that I was at that time. And I didn't have a lot of contact with people, with ex-brethren at all, very little in fact. But then a while after that October, in the new year, I'm just going to read something here. So this whole period shook me up a lot, as I'd never wanted to lose my family, and I was really worried that the brethren would find out what I'd been up to. So early in the new year, I utterly destroyed my laptop, smashing up with a sledgehammer to ensure no evidence on it could be used against me. I remember one evening around that time with another brethren family at our house, having a thoroughly good time, thinking, I don't ever want to lose this. This was exactly my dilemma with the brethren. It's an extremely good social life with a very high standard of living, coupled with a huge level of control. I love my job, working in a successful brethren business, dealing with all types of clientele, from huge global conglomerates through to fairly small businesses. I have 5 wonderful children whom we brought up to be fully committed to the brethren ethos. I had siblings and many great friends within the brethren. I was terrified of losing all this and of having to live out there in the big bad world. I'd spent a lifetime thinking that worldlies were all godless, wicked people without any real sense of righteousness or moral awareness. It had been said so many times that if you go out into the world, then you go out into the darkness. John Hales had said that to leave the testimony where we were privileged to have the most light was the spirit of apostasy. The brethren looked down on other Christians and referred to them derogatorily as Christendom. The brethren are so brainwashed into a state of mindless conviction that they are right and everybody else is inferior in terms of character, discernment, lifestyle, ethics, and knowledge of God. It is commonly stated that we don't want to unchristianize anyone, but whatever. The sense being that unless you're in the brethren, then you're not a real Christian. It creates a huge amount of fear of being excluded from this most privileged places. Within this background of perceived God-given and blessed circumstances, I struggled with a lot of behaviour of the brethren under Bruce Hale's regime. So many precious lifelong principles have been thrown overboard by BDH, and the organisation has been turned upside down. Whilst when I was growing up, brothers in places of responsibility were there due to their spirituality and knowledge of the Bible and the brethren teaching, this was forsaken in favour of those who were successful in business and had good managerial capabilities, who were skilled at strictly enforcing Bruce's edicts and business know-how. Since the marriage breakdown, I'd been relegated to a back seat and removed from any position of responsibility. I still took part in meetings occasionally, but was no longer invited to do so. I was only asked to preach on very rare occasions, and to be fair, this was a relief, as I found it such a strain, as I'd feel obligated to inject some glowing spiel about the great leaders and our brother currently. The meetings at that time had become so far removed from Christian teaching that I struggled to engage. Sometimes things were said that I thoroughly disagreed with, doctrinally or factually false or unsound, but I wouldn't object every time without appearing, I thought, as Mr. Angry. One time a brother quoted Jim Taylor as saying, "When you're wrong, you're right." I challenged this and stated that Mr. Taylor had said, "When you say you're wrong, you're right." If you've been wrong, which is substantially different. And this correction was accepted. Another time, a local brother quoted BDH saying that his father's sufferings were in the same league or principle or condition as Christ's. I didn't dare object to this publicly, but spoke to a well-read older brother about it, and he completely agreed it could not be correct, as John Hales did not include atoning sufferings. And then in June 2014, one evening, my son said to me, he said, "Have you still got that phone?" Stoke knew I got a phone. And I justified it because I was in a 12-step program. And I said, "I'm not having UBT monitor my phone." I said, "I have confidential phone calls and messages and stuff. I'm not having UBT monitor it." Of course, they denied that it was. And I said, "Sorry, it is. I know it is. I'm not going for it." And so, yeah, my son said, "Have you still got a phone?" I said, "Yeah, I have." He said, "Why? You know it's wrong and you shouldn't have it." He said, "It's inconsistent with going to the table at the supper." I explained that going to the table is nothing to do with what phone I have. It has to do with my link with Christ, and that UBT is a complete rip-off. He says, "You know that Mr. Hales knows better than we do, and he gets what he gets direct from the Lord." I said, "I'm sorry. It says in the Bible about not laying up for yourselves, which is completely the opposite of what the brethren are doing with UBT. Then it's Mr. Hales knows more than we do, and we have to trust what he says." I said, "I am not prepared to go against what the Lord says. I do not accept I should put ministry ahead of the Lord's word." The next day, lunchtime, I'd been asked to do a little talk at a 12-step meeting, and I just picked a random reading from a bit of literature, and the title of the page was Freedom from Prison, which a few hours later I thought was interesting. That night we got home from the interchange meeting, and my oldest son said that he was actually coming home for the night. He'd normally stay over there because he worked that direction. And he said he was coming home. So my other two boys had gone out to kebabs, and we shared those. And I went to bed about 10:15. And I was getting undressed. I got a knock at the door to say that a certain person was at the front door and wanted to talk to me. So I pulled on some clothes and went downstairs. I said, you just come outside, I want to talk to you. So I went outside, and it's like, can you come, just jump in the car, probably better there. So I went to the car, and there's two other guys sitting in there, and I got in the front passenger seat, and this was read out to me. Steve, we are here to tell you, you are being confined for speaking to persons out of fellowship. Your good friend Laurie Moffat has dobbed on you. I have been speaking to persons out of fellowship and passing information to them. So I said, yeah, I have spoken to Laurie Moffat, but not much. It says, Laurie has given us lots of information. You've been speaking to lots of people. You need to get right, come clean. It will be confirmed in the meeting tomorrow night that you can't be there. You can stay in the house at the moment, and your family can stay there as well, but you can't eat with them. You've got to keep separate. So that was a bit of a shock.
So again, to put this into context, for us three, it's kind of familiar terminology. But to put this into context, what this actually means for you, the knock on the door was 10:15 at night, not the most social hour. You had to get in the car where there were three brethren men sitting there to talk to you.
Yep.
You were never asked if you wanted any support with that meeting. You had to see them on your own. And then you had this statement read out to you that basically had the potential to rip your life away.
Yeah.
Because you've been having contact with somebody or some persons who had left the brethren. I mean, not a lot of contact, but...
I mean,
and that was...
So basically you were ambushed.
Yeah.
Yeah, essentially. Because actually one of these guys agreed to be at the meeting. You wouldn't have known anything was going on.
No. And then the other thing that I think it makes me feel quite angry, you then get told, the brethren will discuss this at the meeting and you can't be there. Now, how is that right? How is it right that you're accused of a brethren crime, but you're told to stay at home while they discuss it? That's like saying you're accused of a crime and we're taking you to court, but you've got to stay at home. There's nobody there representing you, and the person accusing you's lawyers will discuss it with the judge. I'm sorry, justice doesn't work like that, does it?
It's a complete kangaroo. There's no defence. Of the story. I had no support, no one to
advocate for you or to even offer you emotional moral support.
Exactly. But that's just what they do. It's just
you and many others, sadly.
Many others, So anyway, so the next day I went to my work, not to the brethren I was in, and nobody contacted me or anything until in the evening, and I'd actually gone to a 12-step meeting, and it was double, basically. There's one at 6:30 and one at 8 o'clock, and I decided to do the double. When I came out of the 8 o'clock one, which was 9 o'clock, guys there had said to me, I explained about what happened a little bit, And so some guy said, well, we're going out to a restaurant. You want to come with us? Come for a meal. So might as well. And so I went to my car to get my wallet. And as I got to the car, the hazard lights were flashing. And I thought that's a bit odd, but it was parked on the end in the car park, church car park. And I thought, oh, someone just bumped it or something. And I got in, and as I pulled the door shut, I was like, that's a bit weird. And I looked round, and the rear passenger window was smashed. And now this is my recollections from the time. I'm just going to read. I looked for and found my wallet, which had £80 cash on it, on the front passenger seat, and got out to survey the damage. I checked that my briefcase was untouched and found that my laptop had gone from the front passenger footwell. My laptop was a few years old. It was desperate need for replacement. My wallet, which had been on the front passenger seat with £80 cash in it, was still sitting there. But this wrecked old laptop had disappeared from the passenger footwell the day after I was shut up. Now, obviously, the brethren wouldn't do anything like that.
No,
but strange things happen, isn't there?
Yeah.
Do I sense some sarcasm there?
Was this would this have been your own laptop, so an independent one, or a UBT laptop?
It was a UBT laptop, rented one,
Yeah. So it probably wouldn't have been a huge amount of good to a smashing opportunist, would it, really?
It had lots of records on it, lots of brethren stuff.
Yes.
Thankfully, anything that was vaguely incriminating was always on a memory stick.
Right. Yeah.
Which wasn't stolen by a passerby.
Yeah.
Or passers-by.
And presumably you never got that laptop back.
No, we reported it to the police. I got a crime number, but no, it's funny. You'd think something like that would have been dumped, and someone would have reported it, and it would have been but no, it wasn't found. Maybe someone thought it was valuable out there. I don't know.
I'm sure there are people who thought they had valuable information, Steve. Let's leave it there.
Yeah, we went out to a restaurant, and while I was there, I got a phone call from one of my priests. So I sort of dived out the restaurant because I didn't want anyone to think I could possibly be anywhere so wicked. And I had a chat outside, and I told him about it. And said, "Oh, you poor guy," And so anyway, so yeah, I mean, the guys I was with, they were very kind. They didn't let me pay for my meal. And extremely supportive. I just said on here that this was my first social meal in a restaurant, and I felt very out of place as the environment and situation was so alien. The guys found the whole thing completely bizarre, which became a common experience for me as people struggled to comprehend how this kind of society could exist in 21st century Britain.
Yeah.
So many times people just aghast when they heard my story.
Yeah. Every time. Yeah.
So then I had to tackle the brethren job thing, and I was basically summarily sacked from that. I did show the letter, which of course I've still got, to a barrister that was at one of the meetings I went to. As in the barrister, central London high-flying barrister, and he said that is nothing but religious discrimination. So anyway, we can leave that for another day, but might come in handy sometime. 2 pages of A4 of all the reasons why I was sacked, and none of it was anything to do with my job.
No.
It's all different stuff, and most of it was hot air.
Wasn't even proven proven crimes. I put the crimes in inverted commas.
They jumped to conclusions that some stuff that was on the web had come from me, and it hadn't. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So,
so at this point, you were confined. So what implications did that have for your family at that time?
I'm just going to come to that.
Okay.
I had about 4 weeks later, I got home from work, and my wife said to me, she said, "There's one thing I'd like to say to you. The children are finding it very difficult with you living in the house." My oldest daughter had finished at school. She said it's like her life has come to a standstill. She can't have anyone to stay or do anything with her friends. We're meant to go to someone's house before the meeting. We don't manage to. There's never time. So
again, if I can just pick up on that, is this a ritual that actually happened? If someone within the household is confined, the members that aren't, that are on the way to the meeting, have to kind of go and to another brethren house on the way to whatever.
cleanse.
Yeah.
My children had to.
They had to do the same.
When my children were living with me, they had to do that. They had to spend 10 minutes in my parents' house before they went to the meeting.
Yeah, my parents had to do the same, so they didn't come from an unclean household.
So, and then funny enough, the next day my daughter asked me if I could cut her hair, trim her hair, so she wasn't that freaked out by me having me in the house. And this was a girl, she'd go to the hairdressers, have her eyebrows trimmed, but would ask down her hair. So, and then one night after that, a few days after that, one of my sons came to my bedroom door and asked if he could talk to me. He said it's really stressful, the situation, and not knowing how it's going to turn out, and it was affecting his performance at work, and he was making costly mistakes, etc. He was very tender and loving, and it clearly cost him a lot to talk in this manner. As I was explaining how it affected me, my oldest son entered the room, and I said, "Hang on, look, we're just having a conversation." And he said to his brother, "Don't listen to it. It's a load of crap. I've heard it all before. Come on, come out." The younger one stayed in the bedroom, and so they both ended up staying in the bedroom, and we carried on talking. And so the younger one said that he believed in BDH and held him as a prophet, citing an example he'd heard the previous weekend about a French brother with a vineyard that BDH had told him to sell. He also spoke about some brethren's business experience, how they'd been advised to, they'd had some business advice in view of selling their business. And basically the sales shot up, and then they were told, no, actually, you keep the business because the testimony needs money. And a regular quote at the time was, BDH is the testimony. So the testimony needs money. Then the younger of the two expressed himself that if I was going to reject BDH, then he had no place with me and wanted me to leave the house at the opportunity. The older brother said that in view of the pressure on the kids, I should leave. He said that his younger sister didn't want to come home when I was in the house. He said that from her point of view, she'd always relied on me as her dad, even when there was problems. And then suddenly, at the age of 15, she learned I was rejecting BDH, etc., etc. And it was a massive shock to her. And the fallout for the kids was horrendous. Absolutely horrendous.
But again, trying to picture, at this point in time, where were the brethren with you? Were they giving you opportunities to put things right in whatever that might mean? Were you clear about what you'd done wrong?
I told them pretty much what I told you about what I'd done.
Yeah.
And I apologised to them. I said, and if in doing so I've caused any problem, harm the brethren, then I sincerely apologise and I ask your forgiveness. I was going to come to this. And they said, well, we can't forgive you because we don't know all the detail. Funny enough, in some personal circumstances, 2 or 3 years earlier, I had been told basically that stuff that had happened within my household, and that the priest knew all about, and that I had to trust the priest. I didn't need to know the detail from my own family. And now it's the other way around. They couldn't give me unless they knew all the detail. And later on, a few years later, I mean, I brought this up with them occasionally. I said, when are you going to forgive me? And then one time they said, yeah, we forgive you in principle. And I mentioned this to a guy at church, and he said, so quoting the Lord's Prayer, so Father, forgive us our sins in principle as we forgive those of others also in principle.
Doesn't work.
It's so tragic.
It's just parroted language that we were taught to say that actually I don't think anybody's even stopped to think what it means or whether it even means anything.
No, not at all. But during that period of time, before I was shut up, not one single person ever approached me and asked me if I got a problem or what was the problem or how could they help me? Is there anything we can do? And long-standing priest, who's actually slightly younger than me, but one of my friends, he would actively avoid me in the car park, and I challenged him about it, and he said no way. But my recollection is that he most definitely did, because I tried walking up to him and he'd suddenly changed direction. And then shortly after I've been shut up, I was asked if I would go and visit a psychiatrist in Harley Street, the top psychiatrist, because clearly I wasn't well. So I went to see this psychiatrist with my sister, and we had time on our own, and then he said he'd see her at the end. So he said to me, after we had a long talk through everything, and he said, I forgive you stuff. I could prescribe you with some medication, but he said you'd be better to wash your hair in it. And then he called my sister in, and he said, Steve is showing signs of depression and anxiety, and I would be very worried if he wasn't, given the circumstances. But he does not need any medication.
Whoa.
That was, I was quite relieved about that.
Well, good for the psychiatrist for saying this as it is.
I mean, this is like a brethren approved psychiatrist, obviously.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to jump on a bit. So I then had to move out of the house, basically. I was being put under pressure to move out, and I understand it for the kids' sake, and the brethren, they said, we will do everything we can to get you back on the straight and narrow and stuff like this, but we were on different tracks.
I'll say, what else could you actually do apart from saying, I'm sorry, and if I've hurt the brethren, I'm sorry? What else could you do, Steve?
Well, if I wanted to go back in, I would have to tell them every detail. That's just how they operate. And I wasn't going to. As far as I'm concerned, they didn't need to know. I mean, John in Luke 15, the reprobate son, he didn't tell his dad everything. He said, "I end."
Yeah.
And it's like, and whoa, welcome in,
And also, Also, you would have probably been forced to say that you agreed with everything BDH said when you obviously had query.
I couldn't go back. I was so uncomfortable in the meetings. It was just so far. I mean, doctrinally, stuff was being said that was just so bang out of order. It was bonkers. It was just brethren speak. It wasn't factually correct or doctrinally correct, in my opinion. And there's so much that I disagreed with that was just fundamentally wrong. I could not have lived in. I could not have lived in there. And someone said to me when I was bemoaning the facts, about how awful my circumstances were, and this guy that I was very close to, he helped me a lot in my recovery. He said to me, Steve, he said, when you were in there, you found it really, really difficult. He said, God plucked you out of it, and now you're complaining.
Yeah. That's a really good way to look at it. Yeah.
I wasn't complaining about not being in a brethren, but I was, It's 9 years, just 4 days ago, since I had that knock at her door. And I've had minimal contact since then. I've had expressions of love from my kids. We have had messages. I have met my boys on a very few occasions. I have massive hugs off them. And in fact, interesting, talking of hugs, brethren, aren't meant to shake hands with someone who's under discipline. Well, the night that I was withdrawn from by two of my old mates, they'd done their stuff, told me, and I just laughed, and they said, "Yeah, we thought you wouldn't be too fast." Anyway, they gave me, and I said, "Why?" We went through all the stuff, and then they were going. I said, "Come on, then, give me a hug, just to see." And they both gave me a nice big hug.
It's just farcical, isn't it? It's like I mean, I'm sure the times you've seen your children, you feel that there's still that connection there. You are their parent, but and they will behave, and then there's that sort of I actually think, I mean, I might be wrong, but I think that is probably the majority of the reason why the children don't contact their parents, like your children, Anne, and your children, Steve, is because they know when they do, as you've said to me in the past, Anne, it's still mum, it's still dad. And they actually can cope with that dissonance that here's the mum I love, or the son I love, in your case, Ross. Yeah. But they can't, they can't cope with that, reconciling it with how they think they're supposed to behave. And it's tough for them, isn't it?
It is tough. But I mean, there's priests. I think they should have known better. I mean, they just did what they felt was the right thing to do. And unfortunately, in brethren sort of rules, they were wrong. But it was fun at the time. So just fast forwarding a bit, I then I went to a variety of churches because my faith had suffered. I'd struggled through all of this because, if this is really what Christianity is all about, then, you understand.
Yeah. I don't want any part of it if this is what it is.
If this is what God is, I don't want it. But I didn't lose faith in God. I didn't. And basically, I believe, you can't blame God because men are wrong. People do things in the name of God that are 100% wrong, totally wrong. And we see it in many, many ways. And the brethren do it as well. Yeah. They don't go around murdering people physically, but they murder them morally and emotionally. Yeah. And so I went to churches. I went to some Church of England to start off with, which was I didn't find it like congregation of 6 with an average age of 80, and a cry. Social life wasn't quite. I moved to Oxford near to Oxford, a little village. And one day on Sunday, I looked up, or someone said to me, what you need is an independent evangelical Baptist church. He said, that's where you'll find home, sort of thing. So I Googled this and found one, and I went there, and I was really welcomed. It was nice. And the funny thing was, at the beginning of the service, they did a little talk for the children, and I don't know if you read Pilgrim's Progress in early years, but guy called Christian, basically he had this conversion, and then he left home, and the pastor was talking about this Christian guy who'd left home, and his wife and his children were saying, come back, you must stay with us. And it was, my hairs were on edge. It was incredible. Anyway, the following Sunday, I was going to go there again, and I checked my watch and the sat nav, and I wasn't going to get there in time. So there was another church in Oxford that I'd looked at the website on, and that I thought looked pretty good. So I checked the time to get there, and I could get there in time. So I belted off there in a bit of a hurry. So I was running late, got there, and it's 10:30 service, and I got there, and it was just gone past, and I parked across the street and ran across, and I could see people inside. I went to open the door, and it was locked, and someone came to the door, and I said, have you started already? I thought you started at 10:30. He said, yeah, 10:30. It's only 9:30. I got there and
I thought you found another church that locked their doors, Steve, but no, they weren't yet open early.
Church, and these guys, for me, that wasn't a coincidence that I went there, because they actually had quite a few people in the village where I was, or adjacent village, very close, and I ended up in a home group there, a really strong home group. We'd meet on the Wednesdays. Anyway, that first Sunday I got there, after church, someone came over to me because I was sitting on my own, just a wreck, and came and talked to me, and then asked me back for dinner, for lunch at their house, and they had another couple, and the other couple of guests, they lived near where I was, and this sort of became my surrogate parents. They weren't much older than me, but they put their arms around me and they cared for me, and they had me for meals, and they did loads. Absolutely amazing. The welcome I had was just unbelievable. One of the most shocking things, though, was turning up on Sunday morning. They all looked like they'd just come back from picnic. They were so scruffy. Having been to Brethren churches, which are more like business meetings, and everyone's, no jeans, no chinos, no brown shoes, everyone's in
strict dress code.
I really struggled with that. It's like, are you taking this seriously, guys? Don't you realise where you are? And so I'm going to accelerate this a little bit. There's a lot I wanted to talk about here, but I found, the welcome I had there was just absolutely amazing. The support, the love, the care, the kindness, without anybody asking for anything back. I also found that guys that were 20, 30 years younger than me were better read in their scriptures and better understanding doctrinally of the scriptures. And I was fairly proud of my knowledge of scriptures and the brethren. I was one of those clever clogs who, when anyone said, "Oh, where's the scripture about?" I want to be the one who picked up the mic and said, "Yeah, it is in sort of Ezekiel 26, verse 14, whatever." Honestly, go out there and the chalk and cheese. I was like, nothing. It's incredible. And you see, this couple that sort of adopted me, they were both professors at Oxford University. They lived in a house that my sons or other brethren kids wouldn't even look at as their starter home. These guys, they would be giving tens of thousands a year to missionaries and to church. They live very, very simple life. They drive a battered old car.
But they're very rich because they have enough.
Exactly.
And I think that's the point, isn't it? Yeah.
Real Christians. And it was a shock. It was a real shock.
I bet.
And it's like, my inclination, you're earning all this money. Why don't you get a better car? Why don't you, have better food? Where's a nice big roast joint? Why is it a $1.99 as the pizza or whatever? And absolutely amazing. And then we'd have these Wednesday night home group sessions, and then they'd sit around and they'd pray. And brethren prayers are like, you're long if you're 2 minutes. Some of these guys pray for 10 minutes, and yet it's amazing. And I would listen, rapt attention to the way. I didn't know how to pray.
No.
When I left the brethren, my prayers were a shopping list. It's God, I need this and this and this and this and this and this. Make this person well. Give me some orders today. Help me do this and da 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 da. And I've been taught, very differently, that I need to pray, to ask for the grace to get through the day. I need to be able to have that faith in God, that God knows better than I do. He knows the beginning from the end, or the end from the beginning. The brethren talk about their prayer meeting as a power meeting. That's blasphemous. Do they really think they know better than God and they have to instruct God on what to do? It's bonkers. It's crazy. Really crazy. And so, I got quite involved in that church there. It was lovely. And I got asked out, to lots of people, had me to their houses and loads of support. I also, they put me under a bit of pressure. They asked me if I wanted to become a member of the church. And I was like, well, I don't know. And then they said, well, you'll need to be baptised because it's a Baptist church. I said, well, no, I've been baptised already. And they said, well, no, as Baptists, we believe you should believe and be baptised. It's not child baptism. So I said, well, I think my parents baptised me in faith. And so, I'm not going to be baptised again. And so they were quite decent about it. And they said, okay, if that's what you really feel, we'll go along with it. It's not what we normally do, but in your circumstances, we'll go with it. And then someone said to me, elders had a chat with me about it. And he said, Steve, sometimes people, they've been married for a long time and they will go through their marriage rights again. It's not they're getting married again. It's just like and you could look at your baptism like that and have a church baptism. It's just like a refresher. And it wasn't putting me under pressure, but it's just like, have you thought about it this way? But I thought, actually, I like it. So I was baptised again in Baptist church, which again was an amazing experience, like another sort of fresh start. And then I got involved with street pastors. And street pastors aren't people that go around preaching. What they do, it's an interdenominational group of people, and it's all over the country, where different churches, they will all send one or two of their congregation, and they'll all come together Friday night, Saturday night, whatever, down in the town centre, city centre. This is Oxford City Centre, which is pretty lively at the weekends with 35,000 students there. And they just go out there, and we have rucksacks, and you go out, we've got bottles of water, got flip-flops for the girls who can't walk in their high heels. We've got try and get some sugar into them, because often they'll be drinking and not eating anything, and bits and pieces, just support. And sometimes people would ask us to pray with them. We work closely with the police. We'd have a police radio so we could hear, where the hotspots were, and we could go along. And the police, they said, crime always drops when the street pastors around, and we're all togged up with uniforms and that, and we could go in 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and you've got 4 nightclubs all closing at the same time, and it's mayhem, and we could be walking through the middle and never a problem. These young folk were so respectful and so decent and laughing and joking and giving us hugs and kisses, and they're all half cut, and saw the very occasional ruckus. Hardly anything, just lots of people completely ratted, thrown up, and so you end up with vomit on my shoes and trousers and stuff like that.
Goes with the territory. Yeah.
Part of it. And and it's amazing. I saw these people, and most of them, 80% of them, were not drunk. They're just doing their hair, going out, having a good time, behaving well, and going home. That's not what we were taught in the Brethren. Absolutely fine. And then also, I've met up with extended family who were drawn from decades ago, and I've re-established links with them. And with I had ex-brethren invite me abroad, and I stayed with ex-brethren abroad, and had great times. There is, when I was in the Brethren, the thinking in there is, if you go out into darkness, you won't make it. It's terrible, it's wicked, it's evil, everyone's bad. If you go out, you're giving up your Christianity. It's such a load of rubbish. Most people are lovely. Most people are very decent. Of course, there's some weirdos, there's some horrible, nasty, violent, grotty people out here. So there is in the Brethren. And but most people are fantastic. And the reception I've had at churches has been amazing. The teaching I've had at churches knocks the spots off anything I've ever heard in the Brethren. I'd also say, for anyone who's in the Brethren or coming out, there's some fantastic stuff on the internet. A couple of really good preachers. One is John MacArthur, American pastor, who's in his 80s. He's got thousands of sermons, and he's you think you're listening to Brethren. His theology is very close to the Brethren, but he knows what he's talking about, and he doesn't practice the extreme stuff that the Brethren do. He would have a meal with someone. He would help people. He would go out of his way to help people. And another one, Michael Youssef, who I think he's from Egypt, and he converted to Christianity. Absolutely brilliant. The teaching that's available is amazing. And I have a great life out here now. I carry enormous sadness around with me. I'm desperate to see my kids. I've got children-in-law that I don't know of and haven't met. I've got grandchildren that I don't know of and haven't met. It's heartbreaking. I have occasionally, might be in the cinema or watching a movie at home. If there's something that involves reunion, someone comes home or someone meets up after a long time, I have a physiological reaction. I don't see it coming. I will suddenly do a big, it's like a panic attack, and I'll be in floods of tears. And it is, I can't do anything about it. And it's bizarre. And I'm not necessarily feeling sad. It's just a deep, I don't know where it comes from, deep, as a physiological, emotional reaction that just explodes from inside me when that nerve gets touched. Bang.
It's right in the gut.
It is. Yeah.
For me, it is anyway. It's this. Yeah. I can feel it a bit even hearing you talk. It's just this. Yeah, it is. It's just this gut, deep sadness. But life is so good out here too. It's not. We should never feel guilty because we've been set free. Whatever the reason is, we've been set free. And it's those that are left behind that I'm learning. It's harder for them.
I remember, you'll remember the sort of review period in 2002, 2003. And my husband saw his mother for the first time in 27 years. Now, he was obviously cut up, but I will never, ever forget the look on his mother's face. He was close to his mother. But she's coming from being in the Brethren, and she hadn't seen her son for 27 years. And the look on her face, I'll never forget it. It's impossible to describe, but it probably was the visual of that gut feeling that you feel, you know. And that's when you realise the system that those poor people are in. It breaks people, as you say, it breaks people. But I think what you've said, Steve, is so important, because we hope people in the Brethren listen to our discussions. That's why we do them. We do them to help people who don't understand the Brethren, but we do them to hope people in the Brethren listen. And it's not to be bitter and opposed and all the things we're accused of being. We've said that so many times, but it is to say that actually, look at you've come out, you've had to lose everything, but you've actually found a faith that's kept you really strong. We also know that's not for everybody that leaves, but you do not need to fear that you will lose your faith just because you leave the Brethren. And I think that's the big thing to get through. In fact, you'll probably find it's better, you know, if you leave the Brethren, which seems to be the experience. Yeah.
Just to go back a bit, you talk about the gut feeling. I just want to share, for me, personally, if I'm watching a TV program or watching a film at the cinema, if anything comes up about death or burial, my mum's like nearly 90, and I know she's going to go soon. I'm in floods of tears, and you can't explain it. It's just that gut reaction that you have.
Yeah. It is. And who of us knows what will happen in the future? I think we all live in hope, don't we? That something will happen to force the change, to stop the harm. And that's it.
Well, I do know people are watching and listening, and we don't know. It could be our children. We don't know. You know, in the quiet of the night, I often think, you know, what is going through their minds? What went through my mind? You know, and you know, you were whatever age you were. I was 44. It took all those years to actually have the courage to step outside. To be honest with ourselves for the first time.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for telling us your story. I know there's an awful lot you left out, so you'd be welcome back on any time to fill in those gaps that you want to. But we really appreciate it, and I just hope it gets the message out. And I think, as we've said to all of those that have got children in the Brethren, you almost hope your children do watch it and realise what happened to you, but what's happened now, which is perhaps more important. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
Okay, thanks.
If you are in a high-demand religious group and need help, please go to oliveleaf.network. To share your story or be a guest on the show, email info.getalife@proton.me. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to Get a Life, and comment.